This is the HTC Bolt, a brand new, big-screen, metal-bodied, water-resistant smartphone running Android 7 Nougat. Now, that sounds like a lot to like in a handset, and it is, but news of an absent headphone jack, carrier exclusivity, and some curious hardware choices have us raising an eyebrow to HTC's decision-making. Does the Bolt come together to be an attractive option, or are you better off spending your smartphone buying dollar elsewhere? I'm Steven Shank with PhoneArena, getting to the bottom of where this phone works and where it needs work in my review of the HTC Bolt. Last year, HTC was all over with its One series of smartphones, launching the flagship One M9 along with phones like the One E9, One A9, and a handful of other variants, to say nothing of plenty of mid-range Desire models. Now in 2016, we've also got some new Desires as well as the HTC 10 flagship, but where are the rest of the phones? Well, there may be no new One A10 anytime soon, but HTC's still got some new hardware for us to check out in the form of the HTC Bolt for Sprint. The Bolt's a larger phone than the 10, with a big 5.5-inch screen, but despite the increase in size and weight, the Bolt comes in as a slightly thinner handset, measuring just 8.1mm thick to the HTC 10's 9mm. We also see a change to the phone's basic design, and while we're still looking at a sturdy metal unibody, gone is the HTC 10's curved back, replaced by the Bolt's flat construction. Maybe the most significant change, though, is one that's not visually apparent at all. HTC has seriously beefed up its waterproofing, and while the Bolt isn't quite as water resistant as models like the Galaxy S7, its IP57 rating means that the Bolt will withstand splashes, exposure to water jets, and maybe even an accidental shallow dunk without sustaining damage. While that's a great advancement, it may have come at a price, and perhaps in an effort to eliminate points of entry for water, the HTC Bolt arrives without a traditional analog headphone jack. Recently, HTC announced plans to offer users a free adapter so they can still take advantage of their old headphones, but for now, the phone ships without one. The Bolt's 5.5-inch screen is a Super LCD 3 panel with a Quad HD resolution. It's protected by Gorilla Glass 5, and between that and HTC's UTO protection replacement offer, you should feel pretty secure about it. Color accuracy is solid out of the box, and software controls let you tweak color temperature further. And while it's not the very brightest screen around, the Bolt does have a slight lead on some popular flagship models, making it a good choice for outdoor usage. HTC equips the Bolt with the new Android 7 Nougat and its own Sense UI on top. That makes for a solid software package, combining things like blink feeds, easy access to news and entertainment, with Nougat staples like split-screen app support. But while there's a strong foundation here, the second you start using the phone, you're wading through a bunch of bloat. Thanks, Sprint. The good news is that cleanup is very possible, both through uninstalling apps and taking advantage of Sense's powerful theming engine to change the look and feel of the default interface. A lot of the time, the Bolt handles the load of that software just fine, until it doesn't. You'll be sailing along and then you tap a menu or try to engage with an app and the system just pauses. Part of the blame there may be on HTC's really unusual decision to power the Bolt with the Snapdragon 810 chip instead of the more modern 820 or 821. It's very much a 2015 choice of processor, and as a result, the Bolt doesn't really feel like a current-gen flagship or even mid-range model. It just feels old. Benchmarks back up this impression of a phone that's just not quite up to the performance of current top-tier models, despite a price tag that has more in common with flagships than mid-rangers. The rest of the Bolt's hardware specs continue this tale of a phone that's on the cusp of being a heavyweight, but comes across as just being a little behind the times. Take the Bolt's 3 gigs of memory, for example. It's going to be totally sufficient for many users, but it's arriving in a world where 4 gigs is the new top-shelf standard. At least there's 32GB of storage present, rather than a 16GB option, and a dedicated microSD slot lets you add even more capacity with the help of expansion cards. The Bolt sounds alright, with acceptably loud output from its single bottom-edge speaker. Treble response is a little bit lacking, resulting in a sound that can pick up a muddy quality, but the more interesting story here is what's going on with the Bolt's earbuds. Since there's no headphone jack, HTC bundles the Bolt with its Boom Sound adaptive audio high-res earphones. More than just being a set of earbuds that connect over USB Type-C, these support a special mode where the Bolt plays an audio sample through them and analyzes the way sound passes through your ear canal, adjusting its output to compensate for your unique biology. Honestly, a lot of the effect here seems to be a general EQ boost that makes the earbuds sound better no matter who's wearing them when they're calibrated. But there's also a smaller component that really does seem to vary person to person, suggesting HTC really could be onto something here. Sadly, using those earphones means you also can't charge the Bolt at the same time. Well, that's a criticism we roll out anytime we're dealing with a no headphone jack handset like the Moto Z Droid or iPhone 7. It's especially important with the Bolt, as the phone's battery life leaves a lot to be desired. HTC gives the model a 3200 mAh power pack, and while that sounds big, it's also a lower number than some of the Bolt's 5.5-inch peers. Perhaps it's because of the older components like the Snapdragon 810 or just some poorly optimized software, but in our test the Bolt achieved under 6 hours of screen on time, compared to more than 7 in phones like the Pixel XL or Galaxy S7 Edge. There's no way around it, that's just disappointing. The Bolt does benefit from decent recharge times, and its Quick Charge 2.0 support will restore the phone's battery to full in about 100 minutes. We just wish that once charged, the battery lasted a bit longer. HTC gives the Bolt a 16-megapixel main camera with optical stabilization and an 8-megapixel front facer. In general, performance is decent on both, though you'll contend with the occasional overly light exposure or some washed out looking colors. Low light performance is hit and miss, and while the Bolt works fine up to a point, eventually it really struggles with focus. There's no laser auto assist here. None of this is helped by camera software that feels like it's getting in your way at every turn, relying too heavily on options you have to cycle through with multiple taps rather than presenting you with a straightforward list of options. But maybe the most frustrating thing about using the camera is really slow HDR times. Here, the aging chipset really shows its limitations, with HDR photos taking more than twice as long to process as those shot on current-gen hardware. As a Sprint exclusive, there's not much surprising here in the way of band support, though Sprint does note that with the Bolt's carrier aggregation, the phone should be capable of the highest data speeds of any model on its network. Your mileage will vary there though, and we couldn't even hit 10 megabits per second where we tested the handset. And if this Sprint business makes the Bolt a non-starter for you, be on the lookout for the HTC 10 Evo as the phone's being sold internationally. For all the places the Bolt comes up short, and there are more than a few, HTC could still save the phone with really competitive pricing. Instead, picking up the Bolt on Sprint will set you back a solid $600, just slightly behind big-name flagship models, and well ahead of budget high-end phones like the much better equipped OnePlus 3T. That combo of an unattractive price, underpowered hardware, and insufficient battery life makes the Bolt one HTC phone you're probably better off skipping. I'm Steven Shank with PhoneArena. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more smartphone reviews coming your way soon.